The air is thick with the scent of damp wool and wood smoke as you navigate the narrow, muddy lanes of a mountain village. It is the late 15th century, and winter is tightening its icy grip on the valley. You feel the weight of a heavy leather-bound book beneath your arm, its pages filled with the dark secrets of the Inquisition. Every face you pass turns away, eyes darting toward the ground to avoid your piercing gaze. You are a man of law and a man of God, tasked with sniffing out the invisible rot of heresy. To the frightened families behind these timber walls, you are the final judge of their souls. One wrong word or a suspicious mark could mean the difference between salvation and the stake. Step inside the flickering shadows of the interrogation room to see how fear turned neighbors into monsters. You wake before the sun has even thought of touching the horizon. The air inside your small timber-framed house is thick with the scent of old wood smoke and the damp chill that seems to seep through the very stones of the floor. As you pull a heavy woolen cloak over your shoulders, you notice something you had not seen the night before. There, scratched into the dirt just outside your threshold, is a small, jagged mark. It might be nothing. It might be the scrawl of a passing child or a stray branch caught in the wind. But in this year, in this village, your heart hammers against your ribs because you know that a simple mark is never just a mark. It is a question. It is an accusation. You are living in a world where the invisible is just as real as the visible. For you, the rustle of leaves in the forest is not just the wind. It might be the whispering of spirits. The sudden souring of the morning milk is not just a result of the heat. It is a sign of a curse. You walk down the narrow, muddy street of your village, and you feel the weight of eyes upon you. These are the eyes of neighbors you have known since childhood. You have shared bread with them, helped them harvest their rye, and stood beside them at weddings and funerals. But now the air has curdled. The smiles are shorter. The conversations end abruptly when you approach. This is the era of paranoia, a time when the shadow of the scythe hangs over every doorstep, waiting to harvest not the grain, but the souls of the accused. To understand how we reached this point, you have to look at the world through the eyes of someone living in the late 15th century. For hundreds of years, the village healer was a person of respect. If your child had a fever, you went to the old woman at the edge of the woods who knew which herbs to boil. If your cow stopped giving milk, you sought out the man who knew the charms to break a streak of bad luck. This was common magic, a part of the fabric of daily life. It was not seen as a threat to the soul. It was simply how the world worked. But something has changed. The church, once distant and concerned with the grand politics of kings and popes, has turned its gaze downward, into the very heart of your home. The theologians in the great universities of Europe have begun to write books that turn your world upside down. They are telling you that there is no such thing as good magic. They say that the old woman with the herbs is not a healer, but a servant of the devil. They claim that any power not granted by God through the church must come from a dark pact signed in blood. This is a terrifying shift. Suddenly, the person you trusted most in the village is a potential traitor to humanity. The fear is not just about magic anymore. It is about a grand conspiracy. You are told that there is an army of shadows working to tear down Christendom from within, and your neighbor might be one of its soldiers. As you walk, you see the physical evidence of why this paranoia has taken such a firm root. The weather has turned cruel. Historians will one day call this the Little Ice Age. But for you, it is simply the wrath of the heavens. For years, the summers have been too short and the winters have been too long. The rain falls until the crops rot in the fields. The grain stores are empty, and the bellies of your children are swollen with hunger. Disease stalks the land, taking the young and the old without warning. In earlier times, you might have blamed bad luck or the will of God. But now, there is a new explanation being whispered in the village square. Someone is doing this. Someone has used maleficium or harmful magic to steal the warmth from the sun and the life from the crops. This is the psychological trap of the era. When life becomes unbearable, the human mind craves a reason. It is easier to believe that a specific person is responsible for your misery than to accept that the universe is cold and indifferent. You find yourself looking at the woman who lives alone near the bridge. You remember that she grumbled at you last Tuesday when your pig got into her garden. 2 days later, your youngest son fell ill. Is it a coincidence? Or is it a curse? You look at the man who has managed to keep his cattle healthy while everyone else's are dying. Is he lucky? Or has he made a deal with something in the woods to protect his own while others suffer? The paranoia is a poison that dissolves the glue of your community. It turns the most private moments into evidence. In this world, your dreams can be used against you. If a neighbor claims they saw you flying through the air or standing in a dark grove in their dreams, the law considers that as valid as if they had seen it with their own eyes. This is the concept of spectral evidence, and it means that no one is truly safe, not even in their own beds. The boundary between the physical world and the world of nightmares has vanished. You see a group of men gathered outside the local tavern, their voices low and urgent. At the center is a man you do not recognize. He wears a heavy, travel-stained coat and carries a leather-bound book. He is a witch hunter, or perhaps a local magistrate who has taken it upon himself to purge the land of evil. He is not a monster from a fairy tale. He is a man of law and religion. He speaks with authority and conviction. He tells the gathered crowd that the devil is clever, that he hides in the most unassuming places, and that it is their duty to root him out. His presence changes the very chemistry of the village. Before he arrived, the suspicions were just whispers behind closed doors. Now they are becoming formal accusations. The hunter explains that to remain silent is to be complicit. If you know of a witch and do not speak, you are just as guilty as the one casting the spells. This turns every man, woman, and child into an informant. You look at your own family and wonder if they are safe. You wonder if your daughter might say something foolish in the market that could be twisted into a confession. You wonder if your wife's birthmark might be seen as a devil's mark, the spot where the demon fed. This atmosphere of dread is not just about the fear of being caught. It is the fear of the unknown. The manuals written by the hunters, like the infamous Hammer of Witches, describe a world where the devil is everywhere. He can take the shape of a black cat, a crow, or a handsome stranger. He can enter your house through a keyhole. This means that the enemy is not just a person, but a force that can bypass any wall or lock. The only defense is total, unwavering vigilance. As the sun rises higher, casting long, distorted shadows across the mud, you realize that the village you grew up in no longer exists. The trust that held your ancestors together has been replaced by a web of surveillance. Every glance is weighed. Every word is measured. You are living in a pressure cooker of social and environmental stress, and the witch hunter is the one who has come to turn up the heat. He promises that by burning away the wicked, the sun will return, the crops will grow, and the sickness will vanish. It is a seductive promise to a starving, frightened people. The scythe is moving now. You can hear the sharpening of the blade. The paranoia has moved past the point of no return. It has become a self-sustaining cycle where fear breeds accusations, and accusations breed more fear. You pull your cloak tighter, trying to disappear into the crowd, hoping that your name is not the next one to be whispered in the dark. You are not just a witness to history. You are trapped inside a fever dream that will last for generations. A time when the world went mad and called it justice. The shadow is lengthening, and as the village bell begins to toll, you know that the time for whispers is over. The time for the hunt has begun. This is the landscape of the late medieval mind, a place where the line between the holy and the hellish is razor thin. You see the smoke rising from a chimney in the distance, and you no longer think of warmth or dinner. You think of the fire that purifies. You think of the flames that are said to be the only way to truly destroy the influence of the abyss. The era of paranoia has claimed its first victims, and as you stand in the center of your world, you realize that the most dangerous thing you can be is noticed. The hunt is not just about finding witches. It is about the terrifying power of a community that has decided it would rather destroy itself than live in fear of the dark. You turn away from the mark in the dirt, but the image of it stays burned into your mind, a silent herald of the storm that is about to break over your home. Step out of the mud of the village lane and into the narrow, shadowed streets of a city like Spire or Cologne. The year is 1486. The air here smells different than the countryside. It is thick with the scent of coal smoke, expensive spices, and something metallic and sharp. You follow the rhythmic thud and creak of machinery echoing off the stone walls until you find yourself standing before a heavy wooden door. As you push it open, a bell tinkles overhead, but the sound is swallowed by the groaning of timber and the clatter of metal. You have entered a printing shop. This is the cutting edge of the modern world, a place where ideas are no longer whispered from ear to ear or laboriously copied by candlelight in a silent monastery. Here, ideas are forged in iron and stamped in ink. You watch the workers move with practiced efficiency. They reach into wooden cases, pulling out tiny lead letters and arranging them into rows. They smear thick, black ink over the face of the type. Then, with a grunt of effort, a man pulls a heavy lever, bringing a flat platen down onto a sheet of damp paper with hundreds of pounds of pressure. In this room, the world is changing. But among the Bibles and the legal codes, a new kind of book is being born. It is fresh, the ink still slightly tacky to the touch, and it carries a title that will soon make the very foundations of Europe tremble. Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches. Reach out and pick up one of these pages. Feel the weight of the paper. It is thick, sturdy, and expensive. This is not a cheap pamphlet to be read and discarded. It is designed to last. It is designed to be an authority. You are holding the most dangerous book ever written. It is not a book of spells or dark incantations. It is something far more terrifying. It is a manual. It is a textbook for the systematic destruction of human beings. The man who dreamed this book into existence is named Heinrich Kramer, though he prefers the more scholarly-sounding Henricus Instatoris. Imagine him for a moment. He is a member of the Dominican order, an inquisitor who sees himself as a soldier in a cosmic war. He is not a monster from a fairy tale. He is a man of immense education, driven by a cold, burning obsession. To Kramer, the world is not just a place of trees and sky and people. It is a battlefield where the devil is winning, and he believes he is the only one brave enough to name the enemy. But Kramer has a problem. Only a few years ago, he tried to start a witch hunt in the city of Innsbruck. He walked into the court with his head held high, ready to condemn dozens of women. But the local bishop and the legal authorities laughed at him. They called him a senile old man. They told him his evidence was nothing but fever dreams and gossip. They threw his cases out of court and told him to leave town. You can feel his resentment as you turn the pages of his book. This is not just a theological treatise. It is his revenge. He realized that to win his war, he needed more than just his own conviction. He needed the power of the press. He needed a book that would make it impossible for any judge to ever laugh at him again. As you look closer at the front of the book, you see a long document printed in elegant Latin. It is a papal bull, a decree from Pope Innocent VIII himself, giving Kramer the authority to hunt witches. It looks official, feels undeniable. Below that, he has included an endorsement from the University of Cologne, the highest intellectual authority of his day. But here is the secret that the ink hides. The endorsement is a forgery. The university actually hated the book, finding it cruel and legally unsound. But in this new age of information, if you print a lie with enough conviction and wrap it in the trappings of authority, people will treat it as the gospel truth. Kramer knew that most people would never check his sources. They would see the heavy binding, the beautiful type, and the papal seal, and they would believe. You flip the page to part 1. The text is dense, organized into a series of questions and answers, like a legal debate. The first question sets the tone for everything that follows. Is the belief that there are such things as witches so essential a part of the Catholic faith that obstinately to maintain the opposite opinion savors of heresy? Think about that for a second as you stand in the quiet of the shop. Kramer is saying that if you do not believe in witches, you are yourself a heretic. He is closing the door on logic. He is telling you that doubt is a sin. He argues that the devil is real, and the devil cannot work in this world without a human partner. Therefore, to deny the witch is to deny the power of God. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the damp air of the print shop. He has created a trap where the only way to be a good person is to join him in his madness. Now, move your eyes down to the sections describing the witches themselves. This is where the hammer begins to strike. Kramer focuses his fury almost entirely on women. He asks, why is it that a greater number of witches is found in the fragile feminine sex than among men? He answers his own question with a venom that leaps off the page. He claims that women are naturally more impressionable, more talkative, and, most importantly, possess a weaker faith. He even goes so far as to play with the very word for woman in Latin, femina, claiming it comes from the words fe and minus, meaning lesser faith. You can almost hear his voice as you read these lines, a high, strained, academic tone justifying a deep and primal hatred. He writes about the carnal lust of women, claiming it is insatiable and that they will turn to the devil to satisfy the desires they cannot fulfill with men. He paints a picture of the world where every grandmother, every midwife, and every young girl is a potential vessel for ancient evil. He takes the everyday life, the brewing of ale, the tending of crops, the birth of children, and he twists it. If a cow goes dry, it is not a disease, it is a curse. If a child dies in the night, it is not a fever, it is a sacrifice. You turn to part 2. This is the practical guide. It is filled with stories that sound like nightmares. He writes of witches who can steal the virility of men and hide it away in birds' nests. He tells of women who can fly through the air on grease stools and transform themselves into cats or wolves. To a modern ear, it sounds ridiculous. But as you stand there in 1486, surrounded by people who have seen the plague sweep through their streets and who live at the mercy of the weather, these stories feel like an explanation for a world that makes no sense. The hammer gives you someone to blame for your pain. But it is part 3 that is the most terrifying. This is the legal manual. This is where the iron of the press becomes the iron of the shackles. Kramer explains how to run a trial. He tells the judges that because witchcraft is an invisible crime, the normal rules of evidence do not apply. You do not need two witnesses. You do not need a confession given freely. He argues that since the devil protects his own, the only way to get the truth is through the application of pain. He describes how to strip a woman bare, how to shave every hair from her body to look for the hidden marks of the devil. He explains how to use the rack, the thumbscrews, and the strappado to break the will of the accused. He even suggests that the judge should lie to the prisoner, promising them mercy if they confess, only to hand them over to the executioner once the words have been spoken. You realize as you hold the book that Kramer has designed a system that is impossible to escape. If you cry during torture, you are guilty because you are seeking pity. If you do not cry, you are guilty because the devil is numbing your pain. If you name names, those people are arrested. If you refuse to speak, your silence is proof of your pact. The clatter of the printing press feels louder now, like the beating of a heart. You look at the stacks of finished books waiting to be bound and shipped across the continent. Before this machine existed, Kramer's ideas would have stayed in his head or perhaps in a few dusty manuscripts in a library. But now they are being multiplied by the thousands. This book will travel in the saddlebags of merchants and the trunks of traveling lawyers. It will land on the desks of kings and the pulpits of village priests. It will become the standard reference for the next 200 years. It will provide the intellectual scaffolding for the smoke that will soon rise from every town square in Europe. You set the book back down on the workbench. The ink is dry now. The letters are crisp and black against the white page. It looks so clean, so orderly, so professional. It is a masterpiece of technology and a monument to human cruelty. You walk back out into the street, but the city feels different. You find yourself looking at the women passing by with baskets of bread or bundles of wool, and you realize that because of the book you just held, their world has become a much more dangerous place. The printing press was supposed to bring enlightenment. It was supposed to spread the word of God and the wisdom of the ancients. But as you hear the heavy door of the shop click shut behind you, you know that it has also unleashed a storm. The hammer of witches is out in the world now, and it is looking for something to break. The ink has been spilled, the iron has been cast, and the age of the hunter has truly begun. You walk away from the sound of the press, but the rhythmic thud stays with you, sounding less like a machine and more like a gavel slamming down in a courtroom where no one is ever found innocent. The air of the street feels colder now, and as the sun begins to set, the long shadows of the timber-framed houses look like fingers reaching out to grab the unsuspecting. You have seen the blueprint for the coming terror, and you know that for many, the nightmare is only just starting. You are standing on the muddy outskirts of a small village in the heart of East Anglia. It is 1645, and the air is thick with the scent of damp wool and wood smoke. The sky is a bruised purple, the kind of light that makes every shadow look longer and sharper than it should. You hear the rhythmic thud of hooves on the soft earth before you see the rider. When he finally emerges from the mist, he does not look like a monster. He looks like a man of business. He wears a heavy black cloak, a wide-brimmed hat that shades his eyes, and boots that have seen many miles of travel. This is the man the village has been waiting for with a mixture of desperate hope and paralyzing terror. He is the witch hunter, and you are about to walk beside him as he begins his work. To understand the world of the medieval and early modern witch hunter, you must first understand that most of these men were not sent by a king or a high court. They were often self-appointed. They were men who saw a vacuum of power and stepped into it, fueled by a potent cocktail of religious zeal, personal ambition, and cold, hard greed. You watch as this man dismounts his horse. He carries a leather-bound book tucked under his arm. It is likely a copy of the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches, which has become his map for navigating the invisible world of demons. To him, the world is not a place of random accidents or natural illness. To him, every dry well, every stillborn calf, and every lingering fever is a deliberate act of war from the shadows. And he believes he is the only one who knows how to fight back. You walk behind him as he enters the village tavern, which will serve as his makeshift headquarters. The atmosphere shifts the moment he crosses the threshold. The low hum of conversation dies instantly. Men pull their hats lower over their faces. Women clutch their shawls tighter. You can feel the weight of their gaze on his back. He does not look at them. He goes straight to the hearth, warming his hands, exuding an aura of absolute, unshakable authority. He has no official crown commission, yet everyone treats him as if he carries the voice of God himself. This is the first weapon of the witch hunter, the psychological dominance of the expert. In a world of chaos, he offers a terrifyingly simple explanation for every misfortune. Who were these men before they took up the needle and the rope? You look closely at the hunter across the room. Perhaps he was a failed lawyer who found that the laws of the spirit world were easier to manipulate than the laws of the land. Perhaps he was a merchant whose business collapsed, leaving him with a sharp eye for profit and a heart hardened by loss. Or perhaps he is like Matthew Hopkins, the infamous witchfinder general, a man who was once a quiet lawyer in a small town before he realized that fear was a more lucrative commodity than contracts. These hunters were often men of the middling sort. They had enough education to read the demonological manuals, but not enough status to hold high office through traditional means. The witch hunts gave them a path to power that they could never have achieved otherwise. As you sit in the corner of the tavern, you notice the hunter opening his satchel. He lays out his tools on the wooden table, and the sound of metal clicking against wood sends a shiver through the room. There are long, thin brass needles, often called prickers. There are heavy iron keys and sets of warrants with blank spaces for names. These are the physical manifestations of his trade. He begins to talk to the village elders, and his voice is calm, almost clinical. He speaks of the marks of the devil. He tells them that the enemy is not a stranger from a distant land, but the person sitting next to them in the church pew. He explains that the devil is clever, hiding his servants behind masks of piety and age. You watch the elders nod, their faces pale in the firelight. They are being taught how to doubt their own neighbors, their own friends, and even their own blood. The hunter does not work for free. This is a detail that history often overlooks in favor of the religious drama, but you see it clearly now as the hunter negotiates his fee. He demands 20 shillings from this village for his visit. To put that in perspective, that is more than many of these laborers earn in a year. He also expects his lodgings to be paid for, his horse to be fed, and his wine to be of the best quality. He is a traveling professional, a consultant of the occult. For every witch he discovers, there might be an additional bonus. You realize that his livelihood depends on his success. If he visits a village and finds no witches, he has failed. He has a financial incentive to find evil wherever he looks. The more terror he sows, the more he is worth. You follow him the next morning as the first accusations are brought forward. The process is not a grand trial with a jury of peers. It is an interrogation. You watch as an elderly woman is brought into a small, cold room. The hunter does not scream at her. He is patient. He asks her about the time her neighbor's milk went sour. He asks her if she has ever spoken to a black cat in the moonlight. He uses a technique called watching. He forces her to sit on a hard stool in the center of the room and forbids her from sleeping. You watch as the hours turn into days. You see the hunter and his assistants take turns, staying fresh while the woman slowly loses her grip on reality. This is the hunter's most effective tool, the slow breaking of the human spirit. In her exhaustion, she begins to see the shadows move. She begins to believe his suggestions. She begins to confess to things that are impossible, just so he will let her close her eyes. You see the hunter lean in close, his voice a whisper now. He is looking for the witch's mark, a spot on the body that is supposedly insensitive to pain. He takes his long brass needle and begins to prick her skin. You watch the needle disappear into her flesh, and you see that she does not cry out. Is it because she is a witch? Or is it because she is so dehydrated, so sleep-deprived, and so terrified that her body has simply shut down? The hunter doesn't care about the answer. He only cares about the result. He finds a mole or a birthmark and declares it to be a teat where a familiar spirit has suckled. To the villagers watching through the cracks in the door, this is the proof they need. The hunter has revealed the hidden rot in their midst. As the days go by, you see the hunter's influence grow like a fever. He encourages the villagers to form committees. He turns the children into informants. You see a young girl pointing a trembling finger at a woman who once scolded her for stealing an apple. The hunter takes the child's word as gospel. He has created a world where the most vulnerable members of society are suddenly the most powerful, provided they tell him what he wants to hear. You see the hunter's path is paved with the letters he writes to other towns, boasting of his successes and offering his services. He is building a brand. He is the man who can clean the filth from the land. But there is a weight to this path that even the hunter cannot fully escape. You see him in the quiet moments, sitting alone by the fire, checking his ledgers. Is there a flicker of doubt in his eyes? Or is his conviction so absolute that he truly believes the screams he hears are the sounds of a soul being saved from the devil? Most of these men were not cackling villains. They were the heroes of their own stories. They believed they were the thin line between civilization and the howling abyss of hell. This self-righteousness is perhaps the most frightening thing about them. A man who believes he is doing God's work can justify any cruelty. He can look at a mother being torn from her children and see only a victory for the light. The hunter's path eventually leads him out of the village, his pockets heavier than when he arrived. He leaves behind a community that is forever fractured. Families are broken, and the air of suspicion will linger for generations. You stand at the edge of the village again, watching him ride away into the gray morning. He is heading to the next town, where the rumors of his arrival have already preceded him. He carries his book, his needles, and his absolute certainty. He is the self-appointed savior, a man who found a way to turn the deepest fears of his age into a career. As you look at the empty road where he vanished, you realize that the hunter's path was not just a journey across the countryside. It was a journey into the darkest corners of the human heart. He showed how easily authority can be manufactured, how quickly neighbors can be turned into monsters, and how greed can be masked as holiness. The village behind you is quiet now, but it is the silence of the grave. The hunter has moved on, but the path he carved through the lives of these people remains, a jagged scar on the face of history. You have walked with the hunter, and you have seen that his greatest power was not his knowledge of demons, but his understanding of the human capacity for fear. This fear was his true employer, and as long as it existed, he would never be out of work. The road ahead is long, and there are many more villages waiting for a savior who looks just like him. You are no longer standing in the sunlight of the village square. The warmth of the morning and the familiar sounds of the marketplace have been replaced by a silence so heavy it feels like a physical weight against your chest. You are led down a narrow flight of stone steps, each one slick with the condensation of 1,000 years. The air here is different. It is thin, tasting of iron, old dust, and the sharp, acrid scent of tallow candles that have burned down to nothing. You are entering the heart of the Inquisition's web. This is not just a room of stone and mortar. It is a space where time itself seems to bend, designed specifically to strip away everything you believe about yourself until only one thing remains: a confession. The door behind you closes with a finality that echoes through your marrow. It is a thick slab of oak, reinforced with black iron bands, and when the latch clicks, you realize that the world of the living has effectively ended for you. You are now a guest of the Inquisitor. Across the room, seated behind a heavy wooden desk, is the man you saw earlier. He is not screaming. He is not foaming at the mouth with religious fervor. In fact, he is quite calm. He is dipping a quill into a well of dark ink, his movements precise and practiced. He looks at you not as a person, but as a problem to be solved, a knot to be untied. He begins with the first and most subtle of his methods. He asks you to sit. This is the psychological opening of the web. He speaks to you with a voice that is almost fatherly, almost kind. He tells you that the church does not wish to see you suffer. He explains that your soul is in grave peril, and that his only goal is to shepherd you back to the light. This is what the manuals call the period of gentle exhortation. He asks you about your childhood. He asks if you remember your prayers. Then, with the same conversational tone, he asks when you first met the black man in the woods. He asks if the ointment you rubbed on your joints was made from the fat of unbaptized infants. When you deny these things, the kindness does not vanish immediately. Curdles. He looks at you with a profound sense of disappointment, as if you have personally failed him. He tells you that your silence is not a sign of innocence, but a sign of the devil's grip on your heart. He explains that the enemy is clever. The devil, he says, has frozen your tongue. He reminds you that according to the Malleus Maleficarum, the very book lying open on his desk, a witch's inability to weep is a definitive proof of guilt. He watches your eyes, waiting for a single tear. In this moment, you realize the terrifying logic of the room you are in. If you cry, you are weak and perhaps possessed. If you do not cry, you are a witch. There is no middle ground. Hours pass. You are not allowed to sleep. This is the next strand of the web, the deprivation of the senses. You are forced to stand in one spot, your shadow flickering against the wall as the candles are replaced one by one. The Inquisitor leaves, but his assistants remain. They do not speak to you. They simply watch. Your legs begin to ache. A dull throb starts at the base of your skull and moves forward until it is a white heat behind your eyes. You lose track of whether it is day or night outside. Without the sun, your internal clock begins to fracture. You start to see things in the periphery of your vision. A movement in the corner, a face in the shadows of the stonework. This is exactly what they want. They want your mind to become a playground for the very demons they are accusing you of harboring. When the Inquisitor returns, he is no longer fatherly. He is the judge. He brings with him a man you do not recognize, a man who carries a small leather roll. When the roll is unfurled, the light of the torches glints off a series of long, silver needles. This is the search for the devil's mark. You are stripped of your clothing, left shivering in the damp chill of the cell. They are looking for a spot on your body that is insensitive to pain, a place where the devil touched you to seal his pact. They call it the stigma diabolicum. You feel the sharp, cold bite of the needle as it enters your skin. They prick your back, your thighs, your arms. They are looking for a spot that does not bleed. In the distorted reality of the Inquisition, a simple mole or a birthmark is transformed into a gateway for evil. If you flinch, they move to another spot. If you do not flinch because you have gone numb from the cold and the fear, they have found it. They have found the silent mark. The scribe begins to write furiously, his quill scratching against the parchment like the claws of a bird. You are no longer a human being to them. You are a map of transgressions. If the needles and the isolation do not work, the Inquisition moves to the formal application of the question. You are led into an even deeper chamber. Here, the air is warmer, heated by a brazier of glowing coals, but the warmth brings no comfort. It smells of scorched wood and old leather. You see the instruments. They are simple, elegant machines of iron and wood. You see the rack, a long frame designed to pull the body apart. You see the thumbscrews, small and intricate, waiting to crush the delicate bones of your hands. The Inquisitor explains the rules to you. Torture is not meant to be a punishment, he says. It is a means of purification. He tells you that he is legally forbidden from shedding your blood, a hollow technicality that led to the invention of devices that break, stretch, and crush without ever piercing the skin. He shows you the strappado. It is a simple pulley system attached to the ceiling. They tie your hands behind your back and loop the rope around your wrists. As you are hoisted into the air, your own body weight becomes your executioner. The pressure on your shoulders is unlike anything you have ever felt. It is a slow, grinding agony that feels as though your arms are being torn from their sockets. The Inquisitor stands below you, his face illuminated by the brazier. He is not angry. He is patient. He asks you again about the Sabbath. He asks who else was there in the woods. He wants names. He wants a list of everyone you have ever known, everyone who has ever crossed your path. This is the most insidious part of the web. To stop the pain, you must not only confess to your own imaginary crimes, but you must betray your world. You begin to offer names. The midwife who helped your sister, the old man who sells wood at the edge of town, the woman who looked at you crossly last Sunday. Each name you speak is a new thread in the web, a new victim who will soon find themselves walking down those same slippery stone steps. As the pain reaches its crescendo, your mind begins to provide the details the Inquisitor craves. You start to describe the flight through the night air. You describe the feast where the bread tasted like ash and the wine like gall. You describe the devil not as a metaphor, but as a physical presence, a beast with the head of a goat and eyes like burning coals. You are not lying, at least not in your own mind. The pain has broken the barrier between reality and nightmare. You are telling them exactly what they have spent years writing in their books. You are confirming their world. The ropes are lowered. You collapse onto the cold floor, your breath coming in ragged gasps. Your shoulders are useless, your hands trembling. The scribe approaches you with the written confession. It is a beautiful document, written in elegant Latin script. It details your pact with the Prince of Darkness, your renunciation of your baptism, and your commitment to the destruction of the church. It is a work of fiction, co-authored by your agony and their obsession. You are told that you must sign it. You are told that if you sign, the torture will end. But there is a final trap. If you sign it under the shadow of the rack, the confession is legally invalid because it was obtained through duress. To make it official, you must be taken back to the upper chamber tomorrow and sign it of your own free will. If you refuse to sign it tomorrow, you are a relapsed heretic, and the torture will begin again, even more severely than before. The web is perfect. It is a closed loop of logic that allows for no escape. You sign the paper. Your hand shakes so violently that the signature is barely recognizable. But it is enough. The Inquisitor nods. He looks satisfied. He has saved another soul by destroying a body. As you are dragged back to your cell, you look up at the small, barred window near the ceiling. You see a single star in the night sky, distant and cold. It belongs to a world that no longer knows you. You have been processed. You have been unmade. You are now a shadow in the Inquisition's ledger, a ghost waiting for the fire that will finally turn your confession into smoke. The damp air of the morning clings to your skin like a wet wool blanket as you are led from the darkness of the stone cellar into the gray light of the village square. Your eyes sting, unaccustomed to the brightness, even under these heavy clouds. You have lost track of the days spent in the dark, but the world you return to is not the one you remember. The village of your birth, a place where you knew every face and every fence post, has transformed into something unrecognizable. It is no longer a community of neighbors. It is a theater of judgment. You look around and see the faces of people you once broke bread with. There is the baker whose children you helped nurse through the winter fever. There is the blacksmith who once sharpened your scythe and joked about the coming harvest. Today, their eyes are different. They do not look at you with pity or recognition. They look at you with a terrifying mixture of hunger and dread. They are waiting for a sign. They are waiting for the invisible world to manifest itself in your flesh. Behind them, standing on a raised wooden platform, is the man who brought this transformation to your hamlet. The witch hunter. He does not look like a monster. He looks like a scholar, draped in heavy furs and dark cloth, clutching a leather-bound book as if it were a shield. To him, you are not a person. You are a puzzle to be solved, a vessel of corruption that must be emptied or broken. The air in the square is thick with the smell of wet earth and wood smoke. You can hear the nervous shifting of feet in the mud and the distant, rhythmic tolling of the church bell. It is a slow, steady sound that marks the beginning of the ordeal. In this world, the law of men has proven insufficient. Your denials, your tears, and even your silence have not been enough to satisfy the hunter. When the human mind cannot find the truth, it turns to the elements. It turns to the ancient, terrifying belief that God will intervene in the physical world to protect the innocent and expose the wicked. You are about to face the trials of fire and water. The hunter steps forward, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. He speaks of the purity of the elements and how nature itself recoils from the touch of the devil. You are led toward a large wooden vat that has been hauled into the center of the square. It is filled with water drawn from the local well, blessed by the village priest who stands nearby, his hands trembling as he grips his crucifix. This is the ordeal of cold water. It is a logic that seems impossible to escape. The hunter explains that water is the element of baptism. Because it is pure, it will reject anyone who has made a pact with the Prince of Darkness. If you sink, you are innocent. If you float, the water has refused to receive you, and you are a witch. You feel the rough hemp rope being coiled around your waist. They tie your right thumb to your left big toe, and your left thumb to your right big toe. You are bound in a cross, forced into a position of total vulnerability. The crowd surges forward, their breath visible in the cold air. You see the fear in their eyes, a reflection of your own. They need you to be guilty. If you are a witch, then the crop failures, the stillborn calves, and the sudden illnesses that have plagued the hamlet are not random acts of a cruel universe. They are the work of a person, someone who can be identified, punished, and removed. Your death would bring them the comfort of an explanation. As the men lift you toward the edge of the vat, you catch the eye of the hunter. He is watching you with a clinical intensity. He is not looking for a soul. He is looking for a reaction. You are lowered into the water. The cold is an immediate, agonizing shock. It feels like 1,000 needles piercing your skin at once. The weight of your clothes pulls you down, but the air trapped in your heavy wool tunic creates a buoyancy that fights against the descent. You struggle to breathe, the water rushing into your nose and mouth. In your panic, you thrash, trying to find purchase, trying to pull oxygen from the freezing air. To the crowd watching from above, your struggle is not a human instinct for survival. It is the devil within you fighting the blessed water. If you sink and stay beneath the surface long enough for the priest to finish a prayer, they will pull you up, shivering and half-drowned, and declare your innocence. But in the chaos of the moment, with the ropes biting into your wrists and the freezing water filling your lungs, innocence feels like a distant, abstract concept. The hunter watches the surface of the water, waiting for the bubbles to stop or for your body to bob like a cork. If you float even for a second, the verdict is sealed. But the water is only the first of the trials. The hunter has brought another method of divine interrogation to your hamlet, one that leaves a permanent mark upon the world. He calls it the ordeal of the red-hot iron. You are dragged from the water vat, your limbs shaking so violently that you can hardly stand. They lead you toward a small charcoal brazier where a heavy bar of iron has been resting in the glowing embers. It is not red yet, but it shimmers with a heat that you can feel from several feet away. The hunter tells the crowd that the flesh of the innocent is protected by the hand of God. He cites stories of saints who walked through flames unscathed. He looks at you and demands that you take up the iron. You are told to carry it for 9 paces. The crowd falls silent. Even the birds in the thatched eaves of the nearby cottages seem to have gone quiet. You reach out, your fingers numb from the cold water, and grasp the burning metal. The sound is the first thing you notice. It is a sharp, hissing sizzle, like meat hitting a hot griddle. Then comes the pain. It is not a sharp sting, but a deep, thrumming roar that travels from your palm up your arm and into the center of your chest. You walk, 1 step, 2 steps. The mud beneath your feet feels impossibly far away. By the 3rd step, the smell of your own burning flesh fills your nostrils, a sweet and sickening scent that you will never be able to forget. You reach the 9th pace and drop the iron. It thuds into the mud, sending up a small plume of steam. Your hand is a ruin of blackened skin and weeping blisters. But the trial is not over. The hunter does not pronounce his verdict yet. In the medieval mind, the miracle is not in the absence of the burn, but in the healing. The priest steps forward and wraps your hand in clean linen. He seals the bandage with wax, and the hunter announces that you will be locked away for 3 days. If, when the bandages are removed, the wound is clean and healing, you are cleared of the charges. If the wound is festering and corrupt, it is the physical manifestation of your internal rot. These 3 days are perhaps the most agonizing part of the entire process. You are returned to your cell, your hand throbbing in time with your heartbeat. You are left alone with your thoughts and the growing infection. You know that in the damp, filthy conditions of the cellar, a clean wound is nearly impossible. The very environment the hunter has placed you in ensures your guilt. You look at the white cloth covering your hand and realize that your fate is being decided by the bacteria in the air and the strength of your own exhausted blood. Outside your cell, the hamlet is in a state of feverish anticipation. The hunter has not been idle. He has been moving from house to house, collecting more stories, more accusations. He tells the villagers that the devil never works alone. If you are a witch, then surely you have a coven. He asks the children if they have seen any strange animals near your door. He asks the elderly if they remember any curses you might have muttered under your breath 10 years ago. He is weaving a web of suspicion that turns every memory into a weapon. The hysteria is like a physical weight in the air. People begin to remember things they had forgotten. They remember the way you looked at them during the last harvest festival. They remember a cow that went dry after you walked past the pasture. They begin to fear one another. If you could be a witch, then who else among them is hiding a secret mark? The hunter encourages this. He knows that a terrified population is easier to manage. He knows that as long as they are looking for devils among themselves, they will not look too closely at the power he is wielding over them. The third day arrives. The square is even more crowded than before. People have traveled from neighboring villages, drawn by the grim spectacle. You are brought out once more, your face pale and your body weak from fever. The hunter stands before you, his hand resting on the hilt of a small ceremonial dagger used to cut the wax seals. The priest offers a prayer, but his voice is drowned out by the heavy silence of the onlookers. The hunter cuts the bandages. He peels away the linen, which has stuck to the raw, weeping skin of your palm. He holds your hand up for the crowd to see. The wound is angry and red. Pustules have formed, and the skin around the burn is dark and swollen. There is no miracle here. There is only the natural consequence of pressing hot iron into human flesh. The hunter's voice rings out, clear and cold. He pronounces the word that ends your life as you know it. Guilty. The crowd erupts, a wall of sound that hits you like a physical blow. Some are shouting insults, others are weeping, and some are simply staring with a hollow, wide-eyed fascination. The transition is complete. You are no longer a member of the hamlet. You are a monster. The hunter has succeeded in making the invisible world visible. He has proven his worth to the authorities, and he has solidified his grip on the hearts of the villagers. As you are led away toward the final stage of the hunter's process, you see the wood being piled in the center of the square. It is dry, seasoned timber, meant to burn hot and fast. The trials of fire and water were not meant to find the truth. They were meant to create a narrative, a story that the community can tell itself to justify what is about to happen. The smoke from the small cooking fires in the village begins to rise into the darkening sky, blending with the mist. You realize now that the fire of the trial was only the beginning. The real fire, the one that will turn your confession into smoke and your body into ash, is being prepared. You are caught in the gears of a machine that does not know how to stop, a machine fueled by the very hysteria that has turned your home into a graveyard. The air in your cell is so thick with the smell of damp earth and unwashed bodies that you can almost taste it on the back of your throat. It is a heavy, metallic flavor, like old copper coins. You are sitting on a thin layer of straw that has long since turned to a grayish mulch, feeling the bite of the iron manacles around your ankles. In the absolute darkness of this subterranean world, Sound becomes your only reality. You hear the rhythmic drip of water from a cracked ceiling stone. You hear the skittering of rats across the floor, their tiny claws clicking like dry beans shaken in a jar. But most of all, you hear the voices. They are the voices of those who came before you in this dark place. They are the whispers of the broken, echoing through the corridors of the witch prisons. You are no longer just an observer of history. You are submerged in it. You are the one waiting for the turn of the heavy iron key. You are the one listening for the footfalls of the jailer, wondering if today is the day they will take you back to the chamber of questions. To understand the world of the witch hunter, you must look past the heavy robes of the judges and the sharp steel of the executioners. You must look into the eyes of the accused. For hundreds of years, these individuals were stripped of their names, their property, and their dignity. They were reduced to ink on a trial transcript, labeled as heretics and servants of the shadows. But if you listen closely to the records they left behind, you can hear their humanity screaming through the centuries. Imagine you are standing in a small, cramped room in the city of Bamberg in the year 1628. The flicker of a single tallow candle casts long, dancing shadows against the walls. Before you sits a man named Johannes Junius. He was not a peasant or a marginalized outcast. He was the Lord Mayor of the city, a man of standing and respect. Now he is a ghost of his former self. His hands are trembling so violently that he can barely hold the quill. He is writing a letter to his daughter, Veronica, in the brief moments when the guards are not watching. You lean over his shoulder as he writes words that were never meant to be read by the authorities. He tells her that he is innocent, that he has never seen the devil, and that he has never attended a Black Sabbath. He describes the torture in excruciating detail. He tells her how they put the thumbscrews on him until the blood sprang from his nails and his fingers were crushed. He tells her how they hoisted him into the air on the strappado, pulling his arms from their sockets until he could no longer feel his own limbs. In this letter, you see the true face of the witch hunts. Junius explains to his daughter that he only confessed because the pain was more than a human soul could endure. He tells her that the inquisitors demanded he name others, and when he refused, they tortured him again. Eventually, he broke. He gave them names. He gave them the lies they wanted to hear just to make the agony stop. He writes to her, "Many 100,000 good nights. At the same time, I must let you know how I was treated. It is a heartbreaking farewell from a man who knows that the fire is coming for him, not because of his sins, but because of the relentless logic of a system that cannot admit it is wrong." You feel the weight of his despair as you realize that this was the reality for thousands of people. The legal machine was designed to produce a confession at any cost. Once you were caught in its teeth, there was no escape. The more you denied the charges, the more the hunters saw it as proof of your stubbornness and your pact with the devil. If you remained silent under torture, they said the devil was giving you the gift of silence. If you cried out, they said the devil was speaking through you. Every path led back to the stake. You walk with the accused now, out of the darkness of the prison and into the blinding light of the town square. It is the day of the execution. The atmosphere is strange, a disturbing mix of a solemn religious rite and a public holiday. You see the townspeople lining the streets. Some of them are weeping, their faces buried in their hands, perhaps fearing that they will be next. Others are shouting insults, throwing stones and filth at the prisoners as they pass. To these people, you are not a neighbor anymore. You are a monster that has been unmasked. They believe that by burning you, they are purging the evil from their community and saving their own souls. The walk to the stake is a slow, agonizing procession. You feel the rough wood of the cart beneath you or the biting cold of the cobblestones against your bare feet. The church bells are tolling, a heavy, rhythmic sound that vibrates in your chest. The priests walk alongside the condemned, holding up crosses and demanding a final repentance. They want the accused to admit their guilt one last time before the end, to justify the blood that is about to be spilled. You stand at the center of the square, where a great pile of wood has been assembled. This is the stage where the final act of the tragedy unfolds. The executioner, often a man who lives on the fringes of society himself, is busy with his preparations. He checks the chains and the iron collar that will hold the victim to the post. He ensures the wood is dry and the pitch is ready. There is a cold, mechanical efficiency to his movements. This is his trade, his grisly contribution to the order of the world. As you stand there, you hear the final words of those about to die. Some go to their deaths in a state of catatonic shock, their minds having retreated into a place where the world can no longer reach them. Others use their last breath to proclaim their innocence to the heavens. You hear the story of a woman in England who, as the fire was being lit, looked out at the crowd and cursed the judges who had condemned her, promising that her blood would haunt their families for generations. You hear the quiet prayers of a young girl who simply asks God to forgive those who do not know what they are doing. The fire is lit. First, there is only a thin wisp of gray smoke, curling upward toward the blue sky. Then comes the crackle of the kindling, a sound like dry bones snapping. The heat begins to rise in waves, shimmering the air until the faces of the crowd become distorted and ghost-like. The smell changes. The scent of wood smoke is joined by the acrid, terrifying odor of burning cloth and hair. This is the moment where the rhetoric of the witch hunters meets the brutal reality of human suffering. For the hunter, this is a moment of triumph, a cleansing fire that restores the balance of the world. But for you, standing in the shoes of the accused, it is the ultimate betrayal. It is the moment where your community, your law, and your faith have all conspired to erase you from existence. Yet, even in this moment of total destruction, the voices of the accused found a way to survive. They survived in the secret letters smuggled out of prison cells. They survived in the court records where a scribe, perhaps moved by a flicker of conscience, recorded a final, defiant denial. They survived in the folk memories of villages where the names of the burned were whispered for centuries as a warning of what happens when fear overrides reason. You look around the square as the flames grow higher. You see the faces of the judges. They are not laughing. They are grim, focused, and perhaps even a little bit afraid. They have to believe that what they are doing is right, because if it is not, then they are not servants of God, but something far worse. They are the architects of a nightmare. As the smoke fills your lungs and the world begins to fade, you realize that the legacy of the witch hunts is not found in the dusty manuals of the inquisitors or the elaborate theories of the demonologists. It is found in the silence that follows the fire. It is found in the empty chairs at family tables and the stolen property that enriched the hunters. But most importantly, it is found in the echoes of these voices, the voices of the thousands who were told they were nothing, but whose stories still resonate today as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. You are no longer in the square. The fire has cooled to ash, and the wind has carried the smoke away over the hills. The town has moved on, the shops have reopened, and the children are playing in the streets again. But the ground beneath your feet remembers. The records in the archives remember. You carry these voices with you now, a somber choir of the forgotten, reminding you that the line between the hunter and the hunted is thinner than we ever care to admit. You have walked through the fire with them, and in doing so, you have ensured that their echoes will never truly be silenced. You step out into the crisp, biting air of a morning in the late 17th century. The world feels heavier, perhaps, but also strangely quieter. The frantic, jagged ringing of church bells that once signaled the discovery of a new occult threat has faded into a rhythmic, almost bored tolling for the start of the workday. You walk through the town square of a small Germanic village, and you notice something different about the very ground beneath your boots. It is just mud. It is no longer a canvas for the claw marks of demons or a place where the shadows seem to reach out for your ankles. The atmosphere of constant, vibrating dread that has defined the last 100 years is beginning to evaporate like the morning mist off a river. You look toward the local courthouse. A few decades ago, the windows would have been glowing with candlelight at 3 in the morning as judges and torturers worked through the night to extract a confession. Now, the building is dark until the sun is fully up. When the doors finally open, the men who walk inside are not wearing the grim, feverish expressions of holy warriors. They look like tired bureaucrats. They carry heavy stacks of paper, not the heavy iron tools of the Inquisitor. You are witnessing the beginning of the end of a long, feverish nightmare. The zealots are still here, and they are still dangerous, but the world is starting to look at them with a new and devastating expression. That expression is doubt. As you walk down the narrow alleyways, you pass a tavern where men are arguing over a broadside. You lean in to listen. They are not talking about the devil in the woods or the blight on the wheat. They are talking about evidence. They are talking about the way a witness might be mistaken or how a confession given under the rack might not actually be true. This is a radical shift. For generations, the word of a single accuser or the presence of a strange birthmark was enough to end a life. But now the intellectual weather is changing. You can feel the cooling of the religious fires. This is the twilight of the witch hunters, a slow and agonizing death of a delusion that has claimed tens of thousands of lives. You find yourself standing before the heavy wooden doors of a university library. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of old parchment and the scratching of pens. This is where the real damage to the witch hunters is being done. You see scholars hunched over desks, writing books that will do more to stop the fires than any sword or shield ever could. You look over the shoulder of a man who is drafting a treatise against the use of torture. He is arguing that the human mind will say anything to stop the pain of the thumbscrew or the strappado. He is pointing out that if you torture a priest long enough, he will confess to being a pagan, and if you torture a judge, he will confess to being a warlock. You realize that the logic of the hunts is finally eating itself. The hunters have spent so long widening the net that eventually, the net started to catch the hunters themselves. When the accusations stayed among the poor, the widowed, and the marginalized, the authorities were happy to let the fires burn. But as the zealots grew more confident, they began to point their fingers at the wealthy, at the wives of mayors, and at the clergy themselves. You are standing in the moment when the ruling class realized that no one was safe as long as the hunters were allowed to define reality. You continue your walk, leaving the city behind and moving toward the outskirts of a farming community. Here, the change is slower. You see a woman looking suspiciously at her neighbor, her hand instinctively forming a sign to ward off evil. The old fears do not vanish overnight. They linger in the soil and in the rafters of old houses. But when this woman goes to the local magistrate to report her neighbor for curdling the milk with a curse, she is met with a weary sigh instead of a call to arms. The magistrate asks for proof. He asks for witnesses who are not children. He asks for something tangible. You watch the woman walk away, frustrated and confused. The world she grew up in told her that the devil was around every corner, but the legal system is no longer interested in her ghosts. This is the slow death of the delusion. It is not a sudden explosion of reason, but a gradual tightening of the rules. You see the law books being rewritten in real time. Judges are beginning to demand that spectral evidence, the testimony that a person saw a suspect's spirit or familiar, be discarded. Without the ability to use dreams and visions as proof, the witch hunters find their hands tied. They are like predators whose eyesight is failing. You walk toward an old, crumbling stone structure that used to serve as a dungeon. The iron bars are rusted, and the door hangs slightly off its hinges. You step inside, feeling the damp chill that still clings to the walls. You can almost hear the echoes of the screams that once filled this space, the desperate pleas of men and women caught in a cycle of pain they could not understand. But today the cell is empty. There are no prisoners waiting for the dawn. There is only the sound of water dripping from the ceiling. This silence is the most profound change of all. You realize that the zealots have lost their audience. A witch hunter without a crowd is just a man shouting at the wind. You think about the famous names, the men who wrote the manuals and led the purges. Their books are still on the shelves, but people are starting to read them with a smirk or a shudder of disgust rather than a trembling heart. The terrifying power they once held, the power to decide who lived and who died based on a whim or a dream, is being stripped away by 1,000 small requirements for proof. You find yourself in a quiet graveyard on the edge of the woods. There are many unmarked mounds here, the final resting places of those who were denied a Christian burial during the heights of the Great Hunt. You stand there for a moment, feeling the weight of the tragedy. It took 100 years for the fever to break. It took thousands of deaths for the collective mind of Europe to realize that they were hunting shadows. You see a young man walking past the graveyard, carrying a book by a philosopher of the Enlightenment. He does not look at the woods with fear. He looks at the trees and sees timber or a place to study botany. To him, the stories of his grandfather are just old superstitions, the ramblings of a darker time. The transition is not perfect, of course. You know that in some places the fires will still flare up. You think of the last official executions like those in Switzerland or Poland, which will happen much later than people expect. The delusion is stubborn. It hides in the corners of the mind, waiting for a bad harvest or a plague to bring it back to life. But the structure that supported it, the legal and theological framework of the witch hunter, is rotting away. You walk back toward the town as the sun begins to set. The long shadows of the trees stretch across the path, but you do not jump. You do not look for the shape of a demon in the darkness. You are part of a world that is moving toward the light of the laboratory and the rigorous logic of the courtroom. The hunters who once strode through these streets like gods, deciding the fate of souls, are now becoming relics. They are men out of time, clinging to a reality that the rest of the world is leaving behind. You see an old man sitting on a bench, a former assistant to a local inquisitor. He looks small now. He looks frail. He is muttering to himself about the dangers of the world, but no one is stopping to listen. The children who run past him do not fear his gaze. They do not know who he is or what he did. To them, he is just a grumpy old man in a world that has become much larger and more complicated than he can understand. This is how the nightmare ends. Not with a grand battle between good and evil, but with a slow, quiet drift into irrelevance. The witch hunters did not go away because they were defeated in combat. They went away because people stopped believing in the world they were trying to protect. You feel a sense of relief as you reach the center of the town. The shops are closing, the lamps are being lit, and people are heading home to their families. There is no talk of the Sabbath. There is no talk of the black man in the forest. You stand in the square one last time, looking up at the stars. Once, these stars were thought to be the realm of celestial powers and omens of doom. Now, they are becoming objects of study, points of light in a vast, cold universe that operates by laws of physics rather than the whims of demons. You realize that the slow death of the delusion was the most important victory of all. It was the moment humanity decided to stop being afraid of the dark and started trying to understand it. The era of the zealot is closing. The smoke from the last pyres is drifting away, thinning out until it is gone. You breathe in the cold, clean air. The world is far from perfect, and new delusions will surely take the place of the old ones. But for now, the hunting is over. You turn away from the past and walk into the cool, quiet evening of a world that has finally woken up. The echoes of the hunters are fading, and in their place, you hear only the sound of your own footsteps on the cobblestones, steady and certain, moving toward a future where the only monsters left are the ones that humans create for themselves. You have seen the rise and the fall, and you know that while the fever may return, the light of reason is a fire that, once lit, is very hard to put out.